The Jamie Dyer Show.
The Apollo Theatre Company, in association with Spike Milligan Productions Limited, are bringing a production of The Goon Show to theatres across the country at the moment. They're coming to the Horsham capital on the 11th of October. Earlier today, I had the chance to talk to Julian Howard McDowell, who is the director of the production, and he also plays Peter Sellers. Rather big shoes to fill, I might say. But I had the opportunity to talk to him about how the production came about, and more besides.
Well, I was brought up to a certain extent on the Goons. I was very fortunate to be a part of the Apollo Theatre Company's production of Round the Horn a couple of years ago, which also came to Capitol Theatre, where I played Kenneth Orr. Then that was a radio show which I listened to, along with a lot of other people, I think, with my father, who worked at the time for Forces Broadcasting Service. But my greater love was certainly with the Goon Show, which I was brought up on from a very early age, listening to snippets of that my father would have played in Nicosia, where he was based at the time, to the forces. And I was just attracted by the silly voices, the sounds of Blue Bottle and Eccles coming across the ether was just something that just totally captivated me. And I'd always wanted to put it on as a live show in the same way as we did with Round the Horn. So that's where it came from, and I'm delighted to say we managed to do it.
Well, it's a very, very tricky task because anyone who's not familiar with that show, number one, where have you been? And number two, the sound design is absolutely crazy. Never mind the voices, it's the sound design that's kind of very erratic. How did you kind of come about that? How did you develop that?
Well, that's really what broke the mold for radio shows at the time with Spike Milligan's. Not only the beauty of the writing and the quirkiness of the writing, but the fact that he included sound effects were such an integral part of the show. And using live sound effects was it's a challenge, but it's also great fun. So we have two musicians on the stage who provide the musical interludes for us. Java Jive, two close harmony singers with Anthony and Rach, and they provide all the live sound effects. So we have typewriter noises which are actually made by them playing typewriters. We have the old slapstick, which is literally two pieces of wood slapping together. We have books being dropped on the floor. We have a saw, which actually saws a piece of wood at some point. And so although it is a challenge to make those live effects, it's also great fun. It really does then, you see the spirit of the fun and the enjoyment that all of those performers would have had on stage enjoying that. And there are some things that are recorded for obvious reasons. We couldn't, get a 25-piece orchestra and just do those as a live sound effect. Some of the things have to be recorded, but the challenge of it was also huge fun. This
is kind of in cooperation with Spike Milligan's estate. How did that come about? Was that a tricky thing to make happen?
It wasn't tricky. It was. I was determined that I wanted to do it, and I was also very determined in the same way as we did with Round the Horn that we should be doing it with the blessing of the original writers. In the case of Barry Took and Marty Feldman and their estate, looked after by Lynn Took. And so the person that I needed to contact, of course, was Norma Farnes, who was Spike Milligan's secretary for over 35 years and now looks after Spike Milligan's productions. So I did what Spike would have done, and I wrote quite a few letters, pleading and otherwise, to say that we'd love to do this. It's the very first time that Spike Milligan Productions have allowed this to do a national tour. There have been a couple of short sort of episodes during a couple of comedy festivals, but Norma Farnes was determined to protect the legacy of Spike Milligan, and I think it's testimony to Apollo Theatre Productions, the way we have, looked after or created almost these wonderful comedy shows and this wonderful writing, that she felt confident enough that she'd want to give her blessing to it. And indeed she has, and has come to see it a couple of times and loves it. So that's how, it wasn't difficult to get. I was just very determined that that's what I wanted to do. And thankfully, that's what happened.
What has the audience reaction been? Because there must be kind of a mishmash of people in the audience, people who perhaps weren't there the first time, people who've heard repeats, and, obviously those first-time fans as well, of which there are many.
Yes, and one of the things, we had a lot of support from the Goon Show Preservation Society, which is another society which I contacted in the early days as well, saying that I wanted to do this, and I wanted to do it with their encouragement and help as well, because these guys have looked after the society for over about 30 to 40 odd years, and famously, of course, Prince Charles is patron of that society and has been since its conception. So there is a wide audience. Obviously, people who would have been, like me, probably brought up on the Goons. A lot of ex-servicemen who remember it from the times when they were in service, of course, because it was played probably to troops right across the country during the late 40s, 50s, and beyond. But we've also had at Salisbury Theatre, for example, I had a 10-year-old boy who came up to us after the show who'd come to see, who'd been brought along by his mother because he loved Spike Milligan and loved his poetry. And that was his first taste of the Goons, but he loved it. And to introduce it to a younger generation, of course, is great, because Spike Milligan is still very much in the public conscious, and certainly as far as children is concerned, because his children's books sell all over the world, especially in New Zealand, where he's one of their most popular children's writers. And it's because of the simplicity and the silliness of the writing that appeals to a younger generation. And I think that goes right across the age groups as well. So we've had people who've never heard the Goons before, but appreciate this really off-the-wall humour that they may have recognised in things like Monty Python, of course, which very famously, with Michael Palin and John Cleese, have said the Goons were a great influence on them at the time, and that certainly comes out in some of the later episodes of their shows, how much of an influence that was. We've had some wonderful responses and some wonderful moments too. We had a lady at Winchester who came up to us, and her father actually sang the original Ying Tong song on the record when it was released as a single, because Harry Seacombe wasn't allowed to do it because he was signed to another record label. So that was a lovely moment of she was, loved to come to see the show because it reminded her so much of her father. And then at Torquay, we had the granddaughter of one of the chief sound engineers who worked on the Goon Show when it was being recorded all those years ago. And she now wants to follow in her granddad's footsteps and become a sound engineer. And it was her first experience of listening to the Goon Show. And, that's great. It's wonderful.
It's such a tricky task, because when you look at video footage, the very little surviving video footage that there is of them recording the show, it's very energetic. How do you guys kind of build up that energy and create all these voices? Well,
creating the voices is something obviously we had to work on for a long time, because certainly Colin Elmer, who plays Spike Milligan, spent months listening to episodes of the Goons, as I did obviously with Peter Sellers for things like Blood Knock and Grip Tight Thin, things like that. So that's part of the job, really, is trying to get as much as you can to make sure that you're doing a true reflection of what the sounds would be like. But the energy comes from the fact that we do truly enjoy ourselves. It is a very infectious thing. I mean, we've probably heard these episodes that we're doing, I don't know, 300-400 times by the time we get to the end of the run. But to me, they're still as funny as they were the first time we read them. So that's where it's not difficult to work up there. And of course, the audience provide us with an awful lot as well, because when you see people enjoying themselves and people are laughing, and some of them are going back probably 30 years to a different time, it's a great feeling. And that, gives you an overall feeling of pleasure on the stage as an actor. And it's just, it's easy to get the energy that way. It's good writing. It's good fun.
Which episodes are you doing, and how did you go about choosing those?
Well, there are over 265 episodes to choose from. I didn't listen to all 265, I have to admit. After the research, I really just looked through the ones that were probably popular in terms of the public's consciousness. They would have heard sort of snippets of bits and pieces from episodes, and there are some which are better known than others. So that was a good starting point. So I narrowed it down from that huge amount to probably 30 or 40 episodes, maybe fewer, and then looked at them a bit more closely and decided which ones then represented some of the characters that people would know most. In other words, were interactions between Blue Bottle and Eccles and so on. So which ones contain more of those, that we could give the audience more of that sort of character interaction they obviously enjoy. Strangely enough, and this is absolutely true, we obviously once again wanted to make sure that Norma Farnes was happy with that, and so she had very strong editorial control over what episodes we'd like to do, and very determined that we wouldn't change any of them, and we haven't in any way at all. We haven't brought anything up to date or changed anything. The final selection, which came down to 4 episodes that we choose from, strangely enough, turned out to be Spike's favourite episodes. So that was it. That underlined the whole thing. If they were his favourite episodes, they were the ones that we were going to do. And so that's how we ended up with that choice. We just kept narrowing it down, and then took Norma Farnes' advice and what she felt was that Spike enjoyed most and what the other members enjoyed most, and that's how we narrowed it down, and we got to the final sort of 4 that we draw from, and 3 which we tend to do on the tour.
Well, that's great, and you're coming to Horsham on the 11th of October. Where else are you going on the tour?
We're just over halfway through now. We're off to Peterborough tomorrow, so we'll be Horsham, then we're going to Leatherhead, we're going to Darlington, we're going to Lincoln, we're going to Lichfield. Gosh, I'm trying to think where else we're going. We've got another 20 or 30 odd theatres on the tour. If you go to the Apollo Theatre website, it's probably the best way to look at it. They'll have a list of all the tour dates on there. And for those fans of the Goon Show who also enjoy other radio shows, they'll also ever see our tour of Hancock's Half Hour, which starts in January of next year.
Well, that's great. You answered my next question, actually, which was what are you doing afterwards? I did see that on the website.
And once again, we did it with the blessing of Ray Gordon and Simpson, of course, both who sadly, and Ray Gordon particularly sadly, passed away very recently. But we've done it in exactly the same way, and approached it in the same way as we did with the Goon Show and with Round the Horn, that we wanted to really faithfully reproduce those original shows. And so we will be doing it in the same way. Yeah, so it will be the earlier radio episodes we'll be concentrating on rather than the television series. But yeah, we're looking forward to that as well. It's going to be another great fun to do. And I'm very fortunate to be doing it. I could be playing Sid James in that one, so it's slightly different.
Well, yes, definitely slightly different. And it is great to see kind of vintage radio, as it were, or old-time radio, as they call it in America, kind of coming back onto stage, because, there is a lot to be had, certainly in the comedy anyway. It's very, very popular in the States, kind of stage recreations of old radio shows, so it's great that a company like yourself is kind of bringing that to the fore over here, and certainly, as you say, with the Spike Milligan estate, just the fact that they trust you to do it. So I do applaud you for it.
Thank you. And I mean, the other great thing for us with the Goon Show, of course, it would have been Spike Milligan's 100th birthday this year. So this is his centenary year, and it's nice to be able to do it during that particular period as well. But, he's gone but not forgotten, or goon but not forgotten, as he would have said, probably.
The Jamie Dyer Show.